Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 fantasy football sleepers that no one is talking about for the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we can go in depth into these 5 sleepers, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get on into 5 sleepers that no one is talking about for the 2023 fantasy football season. We begin at number 1 with Samaje Perine, running back of the Denver Broncos, current underdog ADP running back 35 at pick 105.6. Now, I have previously talked about DeVante Williams on my channel and talked about how I liked him where he is going at ADP. But if I'm being honest with you, I also like Samaje Perine at ADP because I fully understand that things might not go perfectly medically wise, and maybe Samaje Perine for the first 6, 7, 8-ish games is the number 1 running back on the team, is getting 70% of the snaps, and in that case, Samaje Perine might be a huge part of your fantasy football team early on in the season. He was the running back 37.5 PPR last season in Cincinnati, running back 45.5 PPR points per game. He played in 16 games in 2022 with 2 starts, having 95 carries, 5.9 per game, ranking 44th, 394 rushing yards, 24.6 per game, 50th. He had 51 targets, 3.2 per game, 20th, 38 receptions, 2.4 per game, 19th, 287 receiving yards, 17.9 per game, 21st, and 6 total touchdowns, number 2 at running back. Now, in terms of efficiency, Samaje Perine isn't the most efficient running back on earth. 5.1 yards per touch, 21st, 3.0 yards created per touch, 16th, but I genuinely think that he doesn't need to be the most efficient running back in this system to pay off heavily at ADP. So based upon what I have read about Javonte Williams, he could play in week number 1, but a doctor who I believe in, who I follow on Twitter, Jeff Mueller at JM Thrive PT, says that he doesn't believe that Javonte Williams will be 100% early on the season, meaning that it is very likely we will get a 50-50 split with Perine by weeks 5 or 6 of the season. So for the first 5 or 6 games, a doctor believes that this is going to be a split that favors Samaje Perine, and then by weeks 5 or week 6, we see more of a 50-50 split, and he believes by week 8, that is when Javonte Williams will be at full volume, right? This is when Javonte Williams might see a 70 to 30% split share in that offense. If this ends up being the case, Perine can be a very reliable option during the early season that you might want to play as your RB number 2 weekly. And then there's also the chance, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, but Williams might not recover on the correct timeline, right? There might be some hiccups. There might be some things that go absolutely fucking wrong, and then Samaje Perine could have even more fantasy football value. And we all know that Sean Payton loves utilizing 2 different running backs. We saw it with Alvin Kamara and Mr. Big Truss woo-woo Mark Ingram in the past. Obviously, Sean Payton coming in should be a big upgrade for this offense. I think Russell Wilson, who could not cook up anything last year, let's ride Broncos country, I think he steps up and looks a lot better in 2023. Now, am I saying that he's magically going to go back to what he was in Seattle, widely considered a top 10, top 8 quarterback in the NFL? Probably not, but I do think he is going to look a lot better. I think that if you are someone who hates Javonte Williams, thinks Javonte Williams is screwed for the season, then you should be even more on Samaje Perine. I still like Samaje Perine, even though I think at some point this season, Javonte Williams will be very valuable in fantasy football. Next up, we move to the number 2 player here, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. Current underdog ADP quarterback 17 at pick 129. Last year was the QB 10, and he was the QB 15 in points per game, playing in all 17 games last season. He had 587 passing attempts, 34.5 per game, ranking 6th at quarterback, 4,400 438 passing yards, 261.1 per game, 6th again. 29 passing touchdowns, 4.9% rate. 5th at quarterback, 7 interceptions, 24th. So a 29 passing touchdown to a 7 interception ratio is incredibly good, especially when you consider all of the shit, the mud that people sling Jared Goff's way, right? No one really expected Jared Goff. Even the Jared Goff truthers probably didn't believe that Jared Goff would be that good in 2022. He also had 29 carries, 74 rushing yards, and 0 rushing touchdowns. Jared Goff is one of those guys that is very much a statue. There are some quarterbacks in the NFL who obviously aren't the Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, the Justin Fields, the Jalen Hurts, who can run all over the place, kind of like Tua, who can run a little bit, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, right? They have that rushing upside, but they're probably not going to rush a lot during the games. Jared Goff is just going to stand in the pocket. He's going to stand there and just hope that he gets the ball out before he gets obliterated, right? He's not going to go ahead and run 5, 6, 7 times a game potentially, right? That is just not in the cards at all for Jared Goff. We have never seen that in LA or in Detroit. Some interesting efficiency stats about Jared Goff. This guy had a 93.5 true passer rating, which is 9th, 61.2 QBR 5th, 7.3 red zone accuracy 8th, 6.4 deep ball accuracy 7th, 6.1 under pressure accuracy rating 10th, and he had the most dropped passes in the NFL. So while his stats were really good, they could have been even better if the wide receivers in Detroit were able to hold onto the ball. This is an offense that has a lot of weaponry around Jared Goff. This is a team that Dan Campbell and the management have set up to be the optimal scenario for Jared Goff. Because again, Jared Goff's stats were great last year. I don't necessarily think he's some top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but coming off the board at quarterback 17, when your number 1 wide receiver is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who looks really good, when they draft Jahmyr Gibbs, who's an elite pass-catching running back, in my opinion, when they bring in David Montgomery, who's also great at catching passes, when they have Jameson Williams, who might be suspended 6 games for gambling a little bit, he's still going to be there for more than half the season. They bring in my main man, Marvin Jones, back to Detroit. They have some other weapons as well, but obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown is that main option. They also draft a tight end who I love in Sam Laporta. So I think that Jared Goff, again, is really set up for success in this offense. I think quarterback 17 is almost laughable in terms of ADP. And it's kind of funny because there are so many good quarterbacks in the NFL. So I kind of understand why he's ranked at quarterback 17, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if at the end of the season, Jared Goff finishes higher than guys like who are going around him, like Geno Smith, like Aaron Rodgers, right? I think he can finish ahead of those guys. The only big knock against Jared Goff is the fact that he doesn't fucking run the ball, right? Obviously, in fantasy football nowadays, you want the rushing quarterback. It's a lot more helpful. In 6 point per passing touchdown, I think that helps Jared Goff because those rushing touchdowns are kind of nerfed in that kind of a league. But again, a loaded offense, a pretty decent quarterback that really flourished last year. He also only had a 4.9% passing touchdown rate, so he didn't throw like 6.9% passing touchdowns, which would have been crazy. It was pretty normal, close to the 5% number, which means that, in my opinion, Jared Goff can repeat that in 2023. The Lions also have a pretty decent offensive line. Their defense pretty suspect, leading them to have to throw late on in games, and they also play in a dome, which is another positive, in my opinion, for the quarterback position. Now we move to player number 3, Nico Collins, wide receiver of the Houston Texans, current underdog ADP, wide receiver 61 at pick 132.3. But before we talk about Nico Collins, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play best ball fantasy football this summer. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy, they are a best ball platform. Like I said, best ball is the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft. You don't have to worry about in-season management. You don't have to worry about setting your lineup. There are no trades, and there is no waiver wire. So the best part about fantasy football, in my opinion, is the draft. So at the end of every single week, the computer on Underdog will automatically throw your highest scoring players into the lineup. So you get to do the draft practice for your normal fantasy football redraft leagues and potentially win a boatload of money. Their biggest contest, the biggest fantasy football contest ever, Best Ball Mania 4, $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $3 million to first place. 15 million in total prizes. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy and click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious, you'll get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. So you deposit 100, they give you an additional 100. You want to do 50 and they give you an additional 50, 25, an additional 25. Please make sure that you guys do check that out. I love Underdog Fantasy, and they also have smaller contests as well. They've dropped $4 contests in the past, $7 contests, and right now there's a $5 Superflex contest on there. So make sure you guys do check that out. Again, link in the video description or promo code Notorious when you sign up. So back into things, Nico Collins is a wide receiver that I have been banging the drums aggressively for all offseason. If you guys have watched a lot of my mock draft videos, I have taken him in basically a lot of the underdog drafts that I do. I take him because I think that this man, Nico Collins, who's coming off the board at wide receiver 61, pick 132.3, is the wide receiver 1 on the Texans. So you're getting the wide receiver 1 on a team that just drafted a quarterback that is a large upgrade over big neck, giraffe neck, Davis, Money, Mills. Wide receiver 78 last year in half PPR and 53 in half PPR points per game. He played in 10 games last season with 7 starts. And in a lot of those games where he was starting, he kind of looked better than Brandon Cooks. And in some games, he was even out targeting Brandon Cooks, who goes a lot earlier in fantasy drafts, obviously now as a Dallas Cowboy. 66 targets, 6.6 per game, number 63. 37 receptions, 3.7 per game, number 72. 481 receiving yards, 48.1 per game, number 68. And 2 total touchdowns, 76th. And this guy was as efficient as it gets, doing it all with a 6.2 target accuracy rating, 100th, right? The ball sometimes was not even in the remote vicinity of Nico Collins. Even if Nico Collins was like Mike Evans or Odell or one of these receivers that as long as the ball is somewhere near them, they're going to catch it, right? The ball was getting thrown into, they're playing in Houston, the ball gets thrown to fucking Dallas, right? San Antonio, right? It was embarrassing how bad the quarterback play was. Yet, this man had a 66.7% catch rate second. Even with the garbage throws from Davis Money Mills, this man is racking them in. 112.1 true catch rating, 4th at wide receiver. This guy can get the ball when it is thrown near him. This guy is getting a better head coach than Lovie Smith. That guy is an idiot. Let's be honest. So an upgraded coach, an upgraded quarterback, and around him, sure, they have Mechie, they have Tank Dell. Sure, they have other options, but I think Nico Collins is going to emerge as the number 1, the target hog, and I think he's going to hang his hog on defenses all season long. I am enamored with Nico Collins. I have been drafting him a ton, and I'm going to continue to do so and continue to hype him up. Moving to player number 4, we got Van Jefferson of the LA Rams, underdog ADP, wide receiver 65 at pick 142.4. Last year was the wide receiver 89.5 PPR and 73.5 PPR points per game, tied with Richie James, Michael Gallup, and Josh Reynolds. He missed the beginning of last season when Matthew Stafford was playing, and he came back to not so great quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield. 11 games played with 9 games started last year for Van Jefferson. 45 targets, 4.1 per game, number 45. 24 receptions, 2.2 per game, number 96. 369 receiving yards, 33.5 per game, 89th. And 3 total touchdowns, 50th. Van Jefferson, another quarterback that dealt with some bad quarterback accuracy, right? He was close to Nico Collins in terms of just terrible target accuracy. Nico Collins, again, was 100th. Van Jefferson, 96th in target accuracy, but he did have a 15.4 yards per reception. Van Jefferson is an incredibly fast player. Now, if you look at the receiving core for the Rams, you can see why I like him. Now, again, in a vacuum, if you're talking about skill of wide receivers in the NFL, is Van Jefferson up there with one of the most skilled wide receivers in the NFL? Of course not. Of course he's not. But he is a big play receiver. He is a guy that could take any catch, any throw to the crib. And that wide receiver core, like I'm saying, like I've been teasing a little bit, is not that great. Cooper Kupp, obviously one of the best receivers in the NFL. We all know how fucking good that guy is. I don't need to get down on my knees, give him the metaphorical gawk gawk 9,000 for you to know how good Cooper Kupp is. But let's be honest with you. After that, they've got Van Jefferson, they've got Ben Skoranek, they've got Tutu Atwell, and Puka Nacua, right? So they don't have a lot of great weapons behind Cooper Kupp. I'm a big fan of Tyler Higbee, but he's a tight end, right? So I think Van Jefferson should slot in as the number 2 wide receiver in terms of volume on this team. Could Tyler Higbee out-target him? Definitely. Wouldn't say that's a crazy assumption to make. Wouldn't say that's crazy to say. But I think Van Jefferson's the number 2 receiver. There's a lot of positive reports about Stafford. Now, early on in the offseason, I was kind of nervous about Stafford because I'm going to be honest with you, if I had to deal with that many back injuries, neck injuries like Stafford, I would have called it quits. But Stafford maybe doesn't like his wife or something. I'm just making this up, right? He probably loves his wife, but maybe doesn't like his wife, right? He's like Phillip Rivers, where he has like a million kids at home. He's like, let me keep playing in the NFL. Maybe that's what Stafford's doing. He just doesn't want to be home. But at the end of the day, if Stafford's looking as good as the reports are yapping about, then there is a way where Van Jefferson easily beats his ADP. And again, he's a guy that might be a little risky on a week in, week out standpoint, right? He's not the most consistent player, which makes sense, right? He's going to pick 142.4. He's not like wide receiver 25 like my boy Allen Robinson was last year. Yikes, yikes, yikes. But I think Van Jefferson in this scenario could easily finish as a top 24 wide receiver. Am I saying he's going to? Of fucking course not. There are so many great wide receivers in fantasy football, but does he have that upside if Stafford's able to stay healthy? I really do think so. And again, a big positive when you got these number 2 receivers on teams with a great number 1, Van Jefferson will never in his life have to face the best corner because Cooper Kupp is going to be shadowed by that man. Moving now to player number 5, the final sleeper that no one is talking about. We're going to go with DeVante Parker, former Dolphin. I have a soft spot in my heart for DeVante Parker. Wide receiver, now of the evil empire, the New England Patriots. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 96. Flip that around to get 69. Very nice, I like. Pick 213.7, so undrafted. Undrafted. Even in best ball drafts, like on Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description, where there's 18 rounds, this motherfucker's not getting drafted in a lot of drafts. Maybe some people start to catch on. But Parker was just given the bag. He got the bag. 3-year, new contract worth up to $33 million with $14 million in guarantees. Now, I know there's still some chatter, little birdies talking about D-Hop coming there. If DeAndre Hopkins shows up in New England, you can take this take and throw it in the garbage like you're playing that game. I don't know if any of you guys ever played this game. You have to have, right? Some people, at least. That phone game back in like the early 2010s where you throw the paper and it lands in the basket and there's like fans and shit like getting in the way of it. You guys had to have played it. I don't know, paper toss maybe it was called. But yeah, you could take this take, throw it in the garbage, burn the garbage down, right? But if D-Hop doesn't come there, which I really don't think is going to end up happening at this point, but I could be wrong, then DeVante Parker's probably the wide receiver 2 on this team. Now, I love Tyquan Thornton. I really do. But I thought Parker might be gone or that Parker was kind of fading out for Tyquan. But you don't pay a motherfucker $33 million with $14 million in guarantees for him to ride the pine, right? Sometimes you got to chase the money in fantasy football. He got the bag. Wide receiver, 64.5 PPR, 65 points per game, tied with Wan'Dale Robinson. 13 games played last year with 11 starts. The stats aren't great, but obviously Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi the Zappinator. There was some quarterback discrepancy last year. Mac Jones didn't play good at all. Their offensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, is a certified dummy. They now bring in Bill O'Brien, legendary offensive coordinator, not the best head coach ever. Actually, he was a good head coach in Houston, and it was kind of just his decisions to trade DeAndre Hopkins for a half-eaten bag of chips that kind of got him out of there, right? 47 targets, 3.6 per game, number 88. 31 receptions, 2.4 per game, number 85. 539 receiving yards, 41.5 per game, 57th, and 3 total touchdowns, 50th. Again, when I talk about the new offensive coordinator coming there, Bill O'Brien, I don't expect the Patriots to have like a top 5 offense in the NFL, but they were a team that was barely throwing the ball last year. They were a team that was getting dogged. I just don't feel like the offense is going to be that bad. Now, as a Dolphins fan, obviously deep down, I hope that the Patriots fucking implode like that ship that went to go look at the Titanic. But ultimately, rest in peace to those people. But ultimately, I don't think that they are going to. Like, I think their offense is going to step up. They have a great defense. Like, they're still a good team. Their problem is they're in a division that is loaded to the gills with talent. Some interesting efficiency stats for DP. Mr. D. Pizzle, DeVante Parker, 11.5 yards per target, second, 17.4 yards per reception, fourth, and 2.19 fantasy points per target, fifth. The biggest question mark and the biggest thing to throw against DeVante Parker is his separation. This guy gets zero separation. I was looking at some next-gen stats. Over the last 3 years, he has been one of the worst, if not literally the worst, over the last 3 years in terms of separation, right? The guy cannot separate. He just can't. But he's good at making those contested catches. And I think Mac Jones is going to look better this year. I think this Patriots team is going to look better. Again, I'm not saying that DeVante Parker is like some must-draft player, but if you're in a deeper league or you're going late in the draft and you're like, you know what, I want to take a shot on DeVante Parker. I think he's a good player. I think that this offense is going to be a little bit more pass-heavy. I think the offense is going to look better under Bill O'Brien, which I completely agree with. That's why I'm talking about him. That I think DeVante Parker isn't that crazy of a pick. And I am going to guarantee you 2 weeks from now, when people start to catch on, his ADP is going to be much higher than wide receiver 96 at pick 213.7 on Underdog Fantasy. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you ended up enjoying today's video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. I hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. Make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Link in the video description again for that first match deposit bonus of up to $100. You deposit 100, they give you an additional 100 if you want to do 50, additional 50, 25, and additional 25. Click on the link in the video description or promo code Notorious. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy!